Come on up.
Thank you, sir. Hey, thanks for coming out on the eve of Christmas Eve, everybody. So happy you were here.
All of you that could be shopping, could be getting things accomplished, have decided to come and
Enough
be with
of
the
all of
Lord
that.
and be with us, and we're super honored.
Yeah.
I'm going to put this on real quick, so you got to share.
Okay.
Share something.
I will share.
Okay.
We have wrapped a giant box that
Yeah,
has something in it
it's true.
for our
True
daughter.
story.
And she is convinced that because it's the largest box, that she has no idea what's inside of it. It's heavy. I'm not afraid to drop it, so it's not like electronics or anything cool. And she is just beyond herself with excitement here at 14 years old, dying to open this present. And if it was up to me, I'd make her wait another week.
Oh, yeah.
Because
this
it's
is
so
just his
much fun to
temperament.
make her
This is
wait.
just his temperament. Okay, so you all know my love language, or most of you know my love language is words of affirmation. Greg, who can sometimes be considered a functional mute, that doesn't work so great. So I've had to learn how to adjust my love language to his love language, which is acts of service, which, by the way, way better than words of affirmation, because he gets stuff done, like gets it done. And so I live a very nice life that isn't a lot of this, it's a whole lot of doing. So I decided this year, because he wants nothing, he wants no dustables, he wants, there's like nothing he wants, that I was going to give him the gift of things already done. Yes, I know, right? Thank you. I'm super
Is
impressed.
that because 2 of the 3 things on my wish list
were acts of service?
Yes. Could you do this and this for me?
Okay, I'm just going to, okay, so you already know that one of my gifts was,
I will let, I know what all of them are.
you know what all of them are?
It's no secret.
So I decided that I was going to give him the gift of, oh, thank you. I don't know if I got it.
I'm not going to help
I'm
her,
getting
apparently.
close. That's okay. I think I'm good. Yeah. Thank you. You can grab my butt too. That'd be awesome. So I decided, you guys know I'm kind of a messy house cleaner, like super bad. And I try not to be, and it's
They don't know that
so
because
bad, and it's
always
shameful.
nice when they come over.
It's nice when you guys come over, but it's not nice when we live there all the time. And so I'm really working on this. I don't know what part of trauma and childhood that has caused me to be such a terrible adult in this area, but super bad adult. Anyway, so I decided I was going to give Greg the gift of a mostly clean house. And yeah, I know that sounds like, really? You're 47, Ange, and this is still a thing for you. But it is. It's a thing for me. So I was going to give it to him for the month of December. But I was going to tell him because that would wreck it, and then I wouldn't do it. So I wasn't going to until the end. So every day, except for 2 mornings that Greg woke up, our bathroom, the living room, the kitchen, our library, like everything was cleaned up.
Yeah.
Guess how long it took Greg to notice?
No. Guess how long it took Greg to get up the courage to not jinx this by saying something?
Oh, really? That's what this is?
Oh, I noticed every day.
Really?
I just
You
decided not to say anything till what?
Okay.
What day?
19th. The 19th. I'm dying here. This is like I have run a marathon 19 days in a row, except for 2 that were just a little quirky.
It's okay. We met and then got married 14 years later. So there's that too.
There's that
We don't
too.
want to rush into these things.
Yes, that's another story for another day. We wouldn't want to rush into these things. So anyway, 19 days, he didn't say anything. I didn't say anything because I was not going to say anything until he said something. Finally, he made a comment, which made me feel so much better because I'm words of affirmation. So, but it's okay. It's all right. It wasn't for me. It was for you. And I'm so proud of myself.
It has been very nice to come out.
Yeah.
If you got him a motorcycle, he would have noticed, right?
Well, he would have been, that's like a hard thing. That's like picking
so many
jewelry
of
for a
them
woman.
already.
So, picking him motorcycle
This
stuff
is
is
true.
really hard. So I actually touched up the paint in his office and painted his door frame and stoop and the front door to our house. So that's what I was doing yesterday, was the gift of
The gift of painting.
The gift of painting. So,
There you go.
okay, so we'd love to hear from you. If anybody has something that you feel like God's doing in your life, and you would like to share, because something happened in the last 2 weeks. Greg said to me, what do you want? I need to know what you want. And besides one really cool, amazing gift was a bunch of essential oils. I'll be honest, that was enough. But he was like, what else, is there anything else that you want? And I realized there was something that I really want, but nobody really could give it to me. So I'm going to share about that later. But it was kind of one of those like heart moments where you realize like there's something in your heart. And we live in a society where we're very fortunately, mostly all of us, super blessed in ways that like we're not living at the, you know, almost all of us are living at the top 4% of the entire world. And so talking about what is it that you want and getting in touch with that is kind of a cool thing. So if you want to share something about that or something that you feel like God's doing in your life, Greg will bring the mic around and we would love to hear from you. So, you are ready to go. Yes.
So once again, talking about the amazing kids, last week they prayed for me, which I was a little selfish and asked for them to pray for me. Does any kiddo remember what you prayed for me for? Abraham was the one that prayed out loud. Do you remember?
Did you hear
Jaden, you remember?
what you guys prayed for?
For a good job.
Yes.
Yeah.
You do remember? Yes.
Abraham, you can say it too.
For a job here.
Yeah, for a job here. So I had an interview last Wednesday, and the kids prayed for me as a group that the interview would go well and such. And the interview went so well that the next morning they called and offered me a job.
I'm sorry I'm stepping on you. That's okay. Oh my gosh. Oh, okay. So
Yes.
just so you, so we started this church thing like a little over 2 years ago in our living room. We never wanted to leave our living room, but we got a little bit too big for that space. So Dan and Christy, Dan's in the control room. They've been driving over an hour to and from church each way and are magnificent. And we've been praying that the Lord would, yay! I'm so excited.
Yes. I did.
That's true.
Yes, so it was just amazing how God, I mean, the timing of everything was so beautiful. And so I start February 4th, which was great that they were willing to wait that long, because then it gets the kids through soccer seasons.
You're going to be here.
Yeah.
So crazy. Yay. Where's Eli? Eli, be here. Yeah, okay. Oh, man. Wow, that's been a long time coming. Are you having goosebumps all over?
I'm so happy for the Gagnons, first of all. I love it. So I had a wonderful opportunity this week. After having a rough emotional week the week before, I had a Secret Santa at work, and I didn't get a present from them. Which is like a little thing. You're like, that's not a big deal, like whatever. But for some reason, just the emotions of the week, it was like horrible to me. And then I found out who the Secret Santa was, and they were just sick the day that they needed to do it, or whatever. And I was holding some bitterness towards that person. You know, you're like, no. Yes, I was holding some rough feelings towards them, because being in the work environment, sometimes people don't rub each other the right way, and you get in tiffs, and this was a person that I got in a tiff in with.
Yeah.
And the Lord gave me an opportunity to say thank you to her for the present. And that was really rough. And I was like, I'm not thankful.
That's so unlike you. This is very unlike you.
This is
by the way.
This is very unlike me. Like this is.
You
I'm
could
always
run
grateful.
over her leg and she'd be like, "No big deal. I got another one." Like,
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's right.
Very unlike you.
This is something that like actually wounded me from like months and months and months ago that I had forgotten, and I had just been harboring this issue with this wonderful, amazing woman. So I said, God, make me able to say thank you genuinely.
Yeah.
And I saw her later that day, and I don't know how. I have no idea how. Not out of my own ableness, but I ended up going up to her and giving her a hug and thanking her for a present that totally didn't even fit me, like at all. So, but I was so grateful, and I was just able to love her in that moment. And then I found out the next day that she was no longer working at my school, that she had taken a family, something helpful for her family in another place. And I realized how grateful I was that she was my Secret Santa and that I got to forgive her after like having an issue like at work. So that was a big step for me. So that's what he did.
That's a good deal. Man, that bitterness thing grows for a long time and you don't even realize it sneaks up on you. Good job. Well done. Anybody else have something they want to share about what God's doing in their life? All right, we're going to release kids then. All the children may go with Miss Christie because she has an amazing activity for you. I saw it and I want to play it. So I know I saw it too. Okay, off you go. Have a great time.
So,
be magnificent.
All kids like 11 and under, is that the rule?
All kids like 11 and under. And if you have cocoa, it'd be super great if you just, can you handle cocoa there or should they leave it here? Okay, so just leave your cocoa here. It'll be here when you get back. I promise not to drink too much of it. And Meredith, if she wants to come up and color with these girls, she can. Yeah. Or she can hang there. It's good. Yeah. Okay.
I wouldn't color with them either.
I love that you're here, and I'm so glad. So yay. So this will be a super good blessing for all of us. So thanks for...
But if you want to get your own colors from that table and take them back, that's what I would do.
You would do that?
I would do that.
My lone, lonely loner?
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't sit there.
That's a lot of aloneness for
Those girls are too cool for me.
Yeah.
We have the same love language.
Yes.
We're like becoming more and more alike. And
you are so alike. I have the two perfect partners on the planet. Seriously.
And then we both were noticing how much trouble you were having, and neither one of us helped you. And we both said, oh, we could have done that.
That's okay. You're so helpful in so many other ways.
I know, but it was just so funny because I was thinking in my head, like, oh my gosh, we're even more alike than
you even
almost
realize.
No words.
Oh, right? It's so hilarious. I love it. Okay. Oh, yeah, you can color there too.
Oh, yeah. Now we're talking.
Well done. All right.
Now we're making stuff happen here.
Okay. So, I'm just going to pray for a moment, if you don't mind. And I'm so excited. I have been learning how to take off, we talked about the should glasses, the glasses that we wear that say should, which has all the obligation things in our life. We just wear these lenses that we don't even realize we're looking through. And so we make all of these decisions about our life based on what we ought to do, you know? Instead of asking ourselves, do I feel passionate about this? Do I want to do this? And I understand that you might not want to work, you know? And yet then you really do want to work in a sense because you don't want the life that happens if you don't work. So getting in touch with our passion and recognizing all the shoulds in our lives is such a huge part of becoming the people that God made for us to be. Because should is what creates the religion that results in the chaos, and it results in the lack of energy and the lack of joy and the lack of passion, and it can often lead our lives to be just, well, we call it survival, you know? And when we lay down what we should do and we start to pick up the invitation, the glasses where God says, do you want to? Do you want to live the life that I envision for you? Not obedience, but the life of co-creativeness, the life of partnership, the life of joy, the life of invitation, the life of overcoming. Would you like to do that? The first thing that we start to realize when we step into a life of invitation and partnership with God is that we discover we hit up against, often very quickly, the very things that tell us we are the opposite of who God says we are. Now, I know that there's a lot of songs out there that talk about our brokenness and our sinfulness, but I don't hear God actually talking about that at all throughout Scripture. I hear Him talking about that He made humanity good. Barak was the word that He used, which means I lift you up and honor you. And I don't think He ever changed His mind. I don't think He ever decided, you're not good anymore, all of humanity. I think what He saw was that sin entered into the world, which was a fallen mindset that confuses us and makes us not see ourselves as we truly are. And it's that fallen mindset that lets us look through this lens of should. And when we lay it down, we then get the opportunity to lay down the fallen mindsets that sin has created that tell us that we're something opposite than what we really are. And we discover it's so cool that this happened to Jesus right away when he became an adult and he was led into the wilderness. It says that he had an encounter with his adversary, and that adversary confronted 3 pieces of his identity. 3 pieces of his identity. If you are who you say you are, then do this, prove it. If you are who you say you are, then prove this. Command the angels. If you are who you say you are. And it was really interesting that those pieces of his identity were key pieces that needed to be settled. And I am of the idea, and people have tons of different theologies, but I'm of the idea that Jesus came into an ever-opening revelation of who he was. I don't think that it was just planted in him and it was fully known. I think that he awakened to his identity and he continued to awaken to it just like us. I think that he was fully human, and in his divineness, he had the Holy Spirit just as we have the Holy Spirit now too. Because we get to be born again into the same kind of relationship that Jesus has with the Father, which is this intimacy via the Holy Spirit. And so there is this unfolding revelation that the Holy Spirit gives to us about who we are. But sometimes we discover that when we take off religion, when we take off the obligation of life, and we start to pick up the invitation, we'll hit up against our very identity. Because I believe, and I don't know about you, but I've discovered that the answer to almost every difficulty in my life comes from God's true identity and my true identity. So my mornings that are going crazy town, or our marriage that was like, a wreck for a little while, was super magnificent, super bad, and now super good. Did you have any words for that? Do you want to add to
no,
that?
Just keep going.
So when we were in a really hard place with each other, the Lord didn't go, try this, do this. He goes, let me talk about who you are. And I'm like, are you kidding? Really? We're going to do that? What good does that do? And he goes, because the answer to being not who you really are is stepping into who you really are. That's the answer to you guys beating the crud out of each other in your relationship. The answer to the hurts and pains that you experience with other humans is because people are acting below their true identity. So many of us haven't even met our true selves. And we would be shocked if we saw who we were without any woundedness. And way to go, babe, for picking that up. That was that totally redeemed the whole mic thing. Excellent. No, I didn't care about the mic thing either, so yeah. You getting no comment?
Well,
Thanks. So
because hope was on Kristen's lap.
The two of you had to tag team it. Way to go. Yeah. Would you help her with that? No? Okay. So we are in the middle of Job, and I love this. And so we're going to do kind of this cool kind of space together. And I'm going to run and see what the Lord wants to do with this. So we're kind of smack in the middle of Job, and I can't do a review, so I'm just going to trust that the Holy Spirit has something that he wants to share with you today that is going to make sense in what we do. Because here's where we are so far. Job has suffered loss of everything except for his wife. His friends have come and sat with him and tried to do the best they can, but basically said, the reason why you're suffering is because you messed up somewhere, which is a theology that many of us have held in our lives and secretly hold in our hearts without even realizing it. We disagree with our mind, but we somehow agree with it in our actions, that we didn't earn it, right? I mean, how many people do you run into where you go, what do you hear the Lord saying about that difficult situation? And do you know what their answer is? Oh, yeah, I probably don't hear the Lord because I'm not doing my quiet time. I didn't know that doing a quiet time was a prerequisite to hearing the Lord. I didn't know that performance was a prerequisite to relationship. But so these are the little ways that it sneaks out, right? The performance. So the friends have done the best they can. And we ended last week with, the friends have all just paraded out the 50 ways that Job has done this wrong. And that is why he is suffering. And Job has said, you have dealt deceitfully with me. And I can't believe that I have done nothing wrong. And we know from the very story that he has in fact done nothing wrong. Because the narrator of the story says he is blameless in the very first 3 sentences of the book. Job, who is blameless and upright before God, the greatest man in the East, ... And we know from the narration, because we can flip to the end of the story, so nice, right? Wouldn't it be great to flip to the end of your life and get God's notes, like on our choices, and on our life? And he goes, because like the greatest regret that people have in life? Apparently around the world, people have a very similar regret. Do you know what it is? Like, this is super
Not
fun.
watching
if you
enough
Google
TV?
it, that is not it. But yeah, I wish it was, because I would love to have that as an excuse. Do you know what, it's very common. All of them kind of wrap up in the top 3. Do you know what the most common regret people have at the end of their life? Yeah.
Like doing stuff.
Doing stuff. Yes, nailed it. They say, I would take more risks. I would fear failure less, essentially. Across the board, they wished that they had gone for it, and they had not been afraid, and they hadn't listened to what other people thought, but they'd gone for it. Isn't that interesting? So we have the end of the story with Job, where God says, by the way, Job is right. So we kind of we get to the end of the story. So this is an interesting thing. And he goes, and his friends were wrong about me. So we know this already. It's kind of a cool, fun thing. But we're starting to ramp into what is really crucial, I think, in this story. And I'm going to tell you, if you pick up a bunch of books on Job, this is not what they're going to share. So I'm going to say this is probably a little controversial. But I'm discovering research that lines up with this that I never found before. So that's super fun. We're not going to get into that today. But it's exciting to start to see this kind of different perspective on some of this language research that's been happening since the internet, because internet now makes it possible for us to research language so much better around the world. And so this isn't like a one-take perspective, but it is definitely controversial. So just throwing that out there. And we're not trying to teach you something you should believe, we're just giving you some possibilities and options. But on the scene comes Elihu or Elihu. Different people pronounce it differently. This person comes on the scene and says to Job's friends, you have messed up. You did not do a good job. You were supposed to convince Job that he had done things wrong. And you did not do a good job because he is not convinced. Have any of you had someone do that in your life? You're like, really? Did this just happen? I know you have. Right? Where somebody goes, hey, they were criticizing you, but they weren't really criticizing you good enough. Let me tell you what really needs to change here. This is what this person is saying. What's interesting about this character, and I'm going to call him Elihu, is that he's called the son of Barachel, the Buzite, the family of Ram, which literally means, my God is Yahweh, blessed by God, of the contemptuous and the lofty family. So that's super interesting, right? Because I really like those first 2 parts, my God is Yahweh, blessed by God, but now we're switching, and we know that the language means, because Job is a poetry book. Job is a book of illustrations and symbolism. So we know that his name means something, and it's of the contemptuous and the lofty family. And what does contemptuous and lofty and pride represent? Those words represent all throughout Job. Anybody want to throw it out? Fallen angels. So we know that this is a fallen angel whose God is God, who was once a part of a blessed family, now ticked off. And Elihu in chapter 33, and some of you should have books on your table. Well, I don't know, maybe we don't. Oh, we do have them in the back. Nikki, do you mind grabbing them? So if you want to open up to Job, we've put things together when some people have their own, where you can write notes. Hey, you can write notes in the margin if you want to. But in chapter 33, this is super interesting. I'm going to make this quick because I want you to spend this next 2 weeks in chapter 33, 34, and 35. Because you're going to find some, right? This is super crazy cool stuff. Because in 33, 34, and 35, you are going to find the agenda of anyone who has ever spoken negatively to you. That agenda is going to be right here. It's super interesting. So I'm not going to share all of it with you. We're going to like unwrap it, not next week, but the following week. Next week's kind of a fun New Year's Eve, and the Gagnons will have that week. It's going to be amazing. You guys are moving here in February. I'm sorry, my brain is just blown up. I'm so excited. Okay, sorry. But I'm going to start with this, okay? This is what Elihu claims in chapter 33. I have an upright heart. My lips utter pure knowledge. The Spirit of God made me. You shouldn't seek God to answer your question of injustice, because that's the big question that Job has now had, right? Job at the beginning said, I could never talk to God. Like, oh, woe is me. My life is horrible. Horrible things have happened. I have suffered injustice, but I could never talk to God. Then he starts getting ticked about his situation. And he goes, I need to talk to God. And then by chapter 30, Job has said, I must have an audience with God. In fact, he even says, if only there were someone who could go to court with me and plead my case and place their hands on both of us. And we know who that is. That's Christ. Who is it's called, literally, he uses the word ransom. If only there was someone who could put their hand on me and put their hand on God and talk to me about what? About the injustice of evil in the world. So I'm going to have you put, injustice of evil in the world. That's the question. Like, we're getting to the deep stuff. Like, this is the injustice of evil. Why do innocent people suffer? And how is it that I grew up in the lie that if you know God, love God, somehow you're going to be better protected or slightly more protected than other people? So Job's going, this is what we all believed, but I'm telling you, something's not right with this ideology. So this is what's cool. Elihu says, don't talk to God. You should talk to me, and I will give your answers. I will be your spokesman before God. Who does that? Who does that? Who do you let narrate your story in your head? Who do you let decide what your life means? Do you let someone who is kind and good and empowering narrate your story? Or do you let a voice inside your head who is saying, basically, who do you think you are? God corrects you with pain. I'm just going to give you a couple. If you're suffering, it's your own fault. And oh, by the way, if you haven't done anything wrong, the fact that you claim that you haven't done anything wrong is your ultimate folly, because now you've suffered pride. Right? Good stuff, right? It's like, what? So, good chapters. I'm going to encourage you to read them. We're going to come back and visit this more in depth. But here's what I want you to put, what was the last thing I had you put up? I didn't.
Injustice of evil, but
Yeah.
I didn't understand how.
Didn't understand it.
Anything.
Okay,
I didn't
yeah.
write that down.
Okay, well, I leave that to you. Good call.
Okay.
Will you do this, though? Will you put up who gets to narrate your story?
Yes.
Thank you. So, who gets to narrate your story? Does a voice that gets to speak into your story but doesn't have the goodness of God continually talk to you in your head? Right? That happens. I wake up in the morning and I hear something negative about myself. I hear something negative about my kids. I hear something negative about my spouse. And I don't tell it, you don't belong here. I allow a voice to narrate my life until I realized I didn't have to. Because see, I thought that voice was me. But I discovered that my spirit is never in agreement with negativity, because my spirit, according to Ephesians 3, is seated in heavenly places with God, always in agreement with God. So my spirit is never in agreement with all those negative thoughts. So why am I letting that voice narrate my story? Because that's what we were born into. I know, right? We didn't know not to let that voice narrate our story. And when we start to step into our true identity Here's what will happen, because this is what so much of our community is experiencing, stepping into our true identity. When you step into your true identity, what will almost always happen, and I love that Graham Cook has some brilliant messages on this. When you start to step into your true identity, what will almost always happen is that your life will go in the opposite direction. When you start to discover parts of who you really are, you will often discover that your life will go boom in the opposite direction. And do you know what that is? It's not a test. It's not here to check out. It is an opportunity for you to stand in the midst of accusation, to stand in the midst of a storm and agree with God and not a negative voice that's trying to narrate your story. So we had an interesting, so Greg rented a movie. He picks Netflix movies that we watch occasionally, and some of them are super bad. And some of them are super good. So I never know when he pulls out like, hey, I got a movie, and I'm like, it could be super bad or super good. It's often been more good than bad lately, but I was always a little skeptical, right? So he pops in the disc, and it was Sully. Have you guys, anybody seen Sully with Tom Hanks? It's the story of the airline pilot. Have you seen it?
I think so.
It's so good, right? Okay, so I'm going to wreck this movie for you. So if you really don't want to know what's going to happen.
They remember what happened with the plane.
What?
Everybody knows what happens with the plane.
Yeah, I mean, it's history, so nobody right? So here's the deal. This guy, I'm blanking on his name. Chesley, I believe was his name, Sullivan, and they called him Sully, worked for U.S. Airlines, and he took a flight up, and birds, Canadian geese, ran into his engines, and he believed he lost both engines. And he had to make a decision, do I return to LaGuardia? Can I make it to Newark Airport? And in the process of 208 seconds, he made the decision from the time he thought he lost both engines to land in the Hudson River. Anybody familiar with the story? So 208 seconds from the time that the incident happened, do you guys know it? That's so right, to the time that he landed, 155 passengers, all were saved, only a couple had minor injuries. And, he's just thinking, we're alive, I'm alive, they're alive, excellent. The drama in the movie and the drama in his life was not the moment where he saved 155 lives. The drama was what happened after he was magnificent. After he was magnificent, he experienced a storm of accusation that he had made the wrong decision. And in fact, would have lost his job, probably been sued, and his entire livelihood would have been completely ruined had those accusations, and they were pretty much determined that it was pilot error, that he should not have landed in the Hudson, he should have returned back to one of the airports. And in fact, they decided to do simulations. He requested simulations because they were going to basically close the case. Did anyone ever do that in your life? Close the case on you? They decide that they are the decider of everything for you, and then they will just close the case? That happens. Or how many of us let that happen to us? We get just a little bit of pushback, a little bit of negative feedback, and we decide, I'm out, you decide. You decide for me. But he knew better. He knew better. He knew that he had made a quality decision, so he stood up. And he's like, I'm sorry, I made a genius decision. This was magnificent. And I just love that. I love that he had that gumption. So he requested that they do simulations. And they did. And then they brought home the big panel, right? The huge panel comes in to review the simulations. They do the simulations live in front of the entire panel and this whole group. And what do they find? That he should have turned back to the airport. So they are ready to string him up. And he goes, well, here's the thing that you've forgotten. You have forgotten that I am a human being. And you guys just turned the airplane around instantaneously after the birds hit the engines. No human can make that decision that quickly. No human can factor that fast. You have to take certain things into consideration. How many simulations did you do at these two different locations before you were able to create a viable landing? And anybody remember how many it was? It was 17 in one location and over 40 in another location. before they were able to get a viable landing. So he said, but nobody even then could make the decision that quick, so I'm going to ask that you give time. And they decided to give, do you remember what it was, 15 or 30 seconds? I can't remember the exact amount. For the amount of time that it takes for you to make all the decisions, to even figure out that birds even flew in your engines, to find out that you even don't have engines. You know, all of that has to be calculated. And so when they did those simulations, they discovered that the plane would have gone down, and everybody, crew and passengers alike, would have died had he not landed in the Hudson. And in that moment, he gets up and says, "Excuse me," and he takes his co-pilot and he walks out in the hallway. And here's what I'm expecting. I'm expecting him to go, "Oh man, I did it right. I did it right." That's not what he does at all. Do you remember? Like, I had such a moment. Really? I had this huge moment. And you don't even remember. That's okay. That's the difference between men and women. Or people, you know, like, you don't have to have my moment. That's okay. That's good. He goes out in the hallway and he goes, "Oh man, I just had to take a second to celebrate with you on how great a job we did." And he needed to take a moment to honor himself and honor his crew and honor his co-pilot, and he didn't want to do that in front of everyone else because he already knew. And I was like, that's who I want to be. I want to be that one who knows who I am in the Lord, and I'm not pushed off. I'm not saying I don't make mistakes. I'm not saying we don't make errors, and that's not what he was claiming. I want to be the person who stands up in accusation and says, let's look at the data. Let's look at what's possible. Let's look at what was the best path here. I want to be the person who stands up in accusation. And so we discovered a little bit of this kind of rumbliness in our church. I've discovered that when you're starting to manifest your true identity, this opposition is no joke. And it's on every single level. The opposition may occur when you find yourself speaking counter to how you know you are, right? When you find yourself blowing up and being in a fight that you know you shouldn't be in. You know, that kind of stuff. So it even happens with groups, and it happened with us as a church, because when the Lord asked us if we would be a church, and we were like, no, but then we said yes. So we said yes, we fully embraced it, we got totally in on it, right? And then I said, well, it'd be nice for us to have signs so that people know, like, that we exist.